David Ricks, welcome to 7:30.
Great to be with you.
Yesterday, the Australian Federal Treasurer, Jim Chalmers, in delivering our federal budget, said about the Australian PBS system, we're strengthening it because Australians need us to, not weakening it because American multinationals want us to. Is that what American drug companies want to do, weaken the Australian PBS?
I don't think so. I think around the world we have a strong interest in making sure that public health provision works properly. I think probably the main question around the world from innovative pharma companies is the time of access to market, and that's probably the area where some more discussion is needed. Australia stands out as a slower system, and that's one we'd like to collaborate with any government to address, whether it be in Australia or anywhere else.
Now, as you're aware, the PBS is under review at the moment by the Australian Health Minister. One of the issues they're looking at is the time it takes to get drugs onto the PBS and into the hands of people. If that goes ahead and if there is some improvement in the way the PBS operates, are you, as the head of Eli Lilly and a member of the Pharmaceutical Principal Lobbying Group, are you happy with the way prices work in Australia?
Well, that's another topic. We would be happy to see improvement in the time schedule. As you may know, Australia is kind of an outlier on the slow end amongst, certainly compared to G7 nations or other Commonwealth states. So an improvement there would be more than welcome. We've had experiences that take several years beyond what we expect in markets like the UK and Canada to get to the Australian market. In terms of pricing, we price our medicines for value, and I think there are opportunities to enhance the value scheme that Australia uses. What I notice is sometimes commonly used medications that are more similar to prior medications, the scheme does a reasonable job of comparing those, but for real breakthroughs, I think often quite struggles. And I think we want more breakthroughs. So that's an area to highlight if they're going to relook at the way they do their work.
Are you talking about a negotiation that ends up with Australia paying higher costs for American drugs?
Well, what I'm talking about is making sure that innovation's fairly valued. I think the alternative, if the value point's low, meaning a low price for a real breakthrough, that an international manufacturer like Lilly would have to evaluate is what will that price point, that low value point, do to our price in other markets? Does it debase the global value point? And when we invest years in advance of a medicine being available in Australia, we have to plan. What will this, if there is a breakthrough, and our business has a tremendous amount of risk, what will be the reward for our investors? And if we can't achieve that obviously the system breaks down. So we think it's important to fairly value breakthroughs that have a real consequence on the health of Australians and other citizens around the world that affect the total cost of delivering public care, and we should be rewarded for that. When we don't deliver medicines that do that, we shouldn't be rewarded. I think that's a simple concept. What I'm highlighting here is there's opportunities to improve that system, and in the past, what I've noticed is Australia tends to undervalue real breakthroughs.
At the same time, what we see from Australia looking into the United States is a place where drug prices are extremely high and inflated by your system, to some degree by the companies, but also the structure of the US system where middlemen inflate the cost of drugs. We look at our low-cost drugs. Yours is not a system that we want to emulate in any way, aside from the marvels of your innovation.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's suggesting anyone should copy the U.S. system. I think there's a lot of problems with it. And primarily, as an innovative company there, I have a lot of problems with it. One of them you mentioned, which is all the hands that touch the product between us and the patient, which only adds cost and complexity and reduces transparency. And I think we're for reducing the cost to the patient and improving transparency, and we've made those suggestions repeatedly to our own government over the past many years. We hope that we can make progress on that in this administration. That said, I think the U.S. does a better job of allowing market access immediately. You can sell your medicines the day you're approved by the regulator, and valuing innovation. Now, that's being done not centrally, but peripherally, because there's so many health actors in the U.S. And I think what our mission at Lilly is to try to create medicines that make a real difference. That's expensive and risky. And when we do it successfully, we would like to be rewarded so we can do it again. That happens more often in the U.S. No market's perfect, but time to market and reward for innovation, those are the principles we'd like to see in any reform, whether it be in Australia or any other market.
Now, of course, this is a long conversation that's going on in relation to the way that drugs are purchased from the United States, but there's something happening in the here and now, which is of course, the new policies of the Trump administration with regards to trade. Are you encouraging President Trump to impose tariffs on Australian pharmaceutical exports to the US with the idea of using that to pressure the Australian government to make changes to the PBS?
Well, on the one hand, we'd like to see changes to the PBS. As I mentioned here, I don't think pressure is the right word, and certainly we've been very consistent through time that we do not support tariffs on medications anywhere. And so we certainly wouldn't be excited to see a policy like that. That said, there are improvements that could be made in all systems, and we'd really encourage the Australian government to look at that. How can we speed up the time? And here I'm talking not in a short amount of time. We had an experience recently where a breakthrough breast cancer medication took over 600 days and 3 steps of negotiation to gain access. It's the only alternative for the use that's been proven for it. It's the global standard of care, and Australian women who had breast cancer had to wait. I don't think that's a good outcome. And it is really about the process, which can be fixed. So those are our primary complaints, and would love to see changes in that regard.
There is a question here about whether or not Australia is replicating work that's already been done by the US Food and Drug Administration when clearing drugs for use. However, since Robert Kennedy became became the US Health Secretary, does that change your assessment, your confidence in the way the FDA works, given his long history of vaccine skepticism?
Yeah, well, we, of course, embrace a science-driven, thorough regulatory review process. I think what we're trying to point out here is that it's really quite unnecessary, particularly amongst developed nations that share information and have mutual recognition on so many other regulatory processes, whether it be like aircraft safety or other important societal regulations. Here, why do we have to redo the process? Mutual recognition's long been a goal of our industry, particularly amongst the most developed nations. So I think it could save taxpayers money in Australia and really avoid replication of review, which adds little value. Quite often we end up in the exact same place with our approvals in Australia, but again, it's slower and creates unnecessary work and cost to the manufacturers, which ultimately has to be passed on and paid for by consumers or taxpayers. So I think there is an efficiency opportunity here with more harmonization. Now, as to vaccine skepticism, obviously that's concerning to us as an innovative company who spend our life trying to create new matter to conquer serious disease, and vaccine is a key tool for that. We're not currently in that technology, but of course I myself have taken vaccines, and my wife's a pediatrician. I believe personally in the power of vaccines and how it's transformed public health. We need to keep that or grow it, not go backwards.
Do you regret then the appointment of Robert Kennedy Jr. into that role?
I mean, I don't want to personalize things. I regret that that could take a shape that would affect the FDA's conduct. If that occurred, I think that would be regrettable.
David Ricks, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you so much.